I know once a month we've got to come here. It would be much easier if we could go to Leichhardt or Marrickville, where it would be much easier for the bulk of residents to go. But of course, this amalgamation business is not for the benefit of residents, and so it is no surprise that they hold the meetings in the most inaccessible council chambers that are available, which is the ones at Ashfield on the 6th floor that we have to go up by lifts, have to be vetted, have to get numbers, have to register our names and so on, like some mini suburban 1984. So it is no surprise, but we keep doing it because for us, local democracy is important. And it is important that we keep on making the point that this is something that was done undemocratically without any doubt whatsoever. This government proceeded to amalgamate forcibly councils without a mandate 6 months after the state election, which they made no mention whatsoever of amalgamations. They proceeded. They had no mandate whatsoever to proceed in that manner. And of course they went through the whole sham, the tick box sham of consulting residents and so on, and came up with a foreordained result that these councils would have been amalgamated. I don't think we should forget, however, that it's an absolute fact, and it's a crying shame that the Liberal and Labor councillors did not join the legal challenge. Then it's true that in the first and second rounds we've lost the legal challenge, but the legal challenges continue. They are now in the Court of Appeal. And what that has meant is that those councils that took up the legal fight still exist. And so that there is some kind of local democracy exists in at least half a dozen councils across Sydney. We're here to keep the idea of local democracy, of real local councils alive, and of those councils taking up the battles, whether they're small battles in your street with overdevelopment, or they're the big battles that are going to ruin Sydney, like WestConnex.
People are feeling demoralised about this. They think there's nothing else they can do. And time and again people will say, oh well, they're doing it now, that's progress, nothing more we can do. Nothing could be further from the truth. Stage one certainly is happening. That's the widening. It probably will be completed. And that's when, soon after it's completed, tolls will be implemented. And that is when the people of Western Sydney will learn that what was previously a free motorway will be tolled. And then they will be sitting in traffic paying for the privilege. Stage 1B, which is the tunnel going through from Homebush to Haberfield, is underway, but who knows if it will be finished and whether the money will be available to do it. Our group, WestConnex, is about to start a divestment campaign, and it'll be on our website, and we will be encouraging those of you who have any money at all in your bank account, in your super account, in shares, to find out who is helping to invest in this rotten tollway madness. Not only the banks, but those contractors, such as ACOM and Lend-Lease, and the company that's just been taken over, Leighton's. And what about the tree lopping companies that have gone through Haberfield chopping out trees in Reg Cody Reserve? No reason. Let's find out who's funding them. We will be giving you a petition online and form letters you can write to your bank or your shareholding company saying, I'm moving my money to an organisation, a financial institution that does not invest in WestConnex.
My council is Strathfield Council, and as an example, as what was told before, we are still in the court and we are still working council as before.
But basically it deals with Wattle Street and the landscape plan and the impacts associated with the 6 houses from Ash Lane to Parramatta Road. I believe they have been treated inadequately in the way they have no protection from this roadway. They have basically 4 lanes in front of their homes now they'll have 10. And when you look at the landscape drawing, they're on the western side. The eastern side has a jungle and a noise retention wall on the rear of their homes. On the eastern side, on the western side, where these homes are, 5 metres from their bedrooms, is 10 lanes of roadway, and there's no protection. There's not even a wall, there's not a barrier, there's not even a tree. There's no protection for them. I'm concerned that not only is it an issue for noise and sound, it's a safety issue because it's right on the apex of where vehicles will be changing lanes to access the tunnels, and when cars are changing lanes, it leads to impacts, and these houses are directly in the line of fire without anything being done with either a road alignment or some sort of barrier or protection for these houses. They're really being really disadvantaged.
There's dozens of homes being impacted severely by this road, and this plan does little to support improvements for this community. Usually when you have a road of this magnitude being built, it's on a greenfield site. This is running through the middle of a community. There's a serious problem with people being able to cross roads. The report and the submission made by our officers, and I thank them for that submission that they made, it highlights some of the issues in relation to people crossing roads, about the difficulty, the complete demarcation of our community. We're going to have whole sections of our community that literally are going to be isolated. We've got the Wolseley Northcote Street section. We're going to have Parramatta Road at Yasma. Heaven forbid, I don't know how anyone's supposed to get across there. It doesn't show where you're going to be able to cross Parramatta Road, so people from one side to the other are no longer going to be able to get a decent access. They're huge roads, corner of Wattle Street, no traffic island, no way for, and that's an access route to the school. So it just mind boggles at the difficulties that people are going to experience.
I'll reiterate just a couple of things that Lucille has said. This is a really, I still think this is the most stupid project, and I was pleased during the week to get an email to see that some of the campaigning will now move to the west, where really the issue I keep saying the issue has to be one in the west as well as here. And we seem to, most of us are converted here. There are a few people who don't see the impact of this. Now, I'll just reiterate one point. How can a stack that is 8 stories high, 26 metres, clad in corrugated iron, have no visual impact in a heritage area? The other thing that astonishes me is that these stacks are so close to a public school, so close to the infant's home, so close to a busy hardware store, and they claim that it will have no impact. I think that says a lot about this project in general. I'm very happy to support the officers' report, and I think it's shocking that so little of our submissions are listened to.
As one of those residents from Wattle Street, I'm a property owner of 24 Wattle Street. This is Matt, who is property owner number 20 Wattle Street. We're greatly concerned about what we will wake to at the completion of the WestConnex projects. At the moment, as mentioned by Victor Macri, we are currently on Wattle Street, which undeniably, yes, is a busy road, but there is a vast difference or disparity between Wattle Street now and what we will wake to on the completion of this project, which is a 10-lane highway with no barrier, no shielding, nothing, completely nothing to shelter us from the noise, the traffic, the pollution, and everything else. In addition to this, we're also living with the constant noise, day and night. The contractors work 3 nights a week, so that means that they start at 11 and finish at 6 o'clock in the morning, and then the day shift starts at 7. So there is no reprieve. We are constantly woken by noise, or in our case, our children are woken with the noise of an evening or can't get to sleep.
The report that we are actually discussing, and which has been so well discussed by my previous speakers, is an absolute disgrace. But I do commend the council staff who wrote it, because they point that out quite clearly. Council's motions have been not addressed, and their recommendations have been ignored, and the outcome of that report is an absolute disgrace. What concerns me, though, is what you will do about it, because I have little faith that you will actually take up any sort of fight. At the last meeting, I asked 3 times for you to provide a copy of the letter that you wrote to the department asking for an early election. I'm still to provide a response from you.
It's on the Inner West Council website. It has been since the last meeting.
Excellent. I'll have another trawl through it. I did actually go looking for it. Unfortunately, I couldn't find it. But what I did find was some items in relation to Reg Cody Reserve, which are of interest. I did find a settlement in the Land and Environmental Court, possibly brought about by the previous council, where it was settled and compensation increased. And then it went on to mention about how RMS wishes to buy and lease a further 200 square metre block of land in the reserve. Ladies and gentlemen, 200 square metres, for those who don't know, is well in excess of the average land size of many of the inner city suburbs. It could easily accommodate a 3-bedroom detached semi with off-street parking. Anyone with any brains activity who resides in Sydney would know the potential value of this land. Except RMS. They have offered the princely sum of $3,300. $3,300, ladies and gentlemen. Imagine that. If they called me, I would have offered at least another 100. The unelected council is investigating before possibly taking this matter to the Land and Environmental Court.
Why don't they say no now?
I urge the unelected administrator to stop investigating and start filling in the application form. It's a clearly undervalued piece of land, and it needs to go before that court, and you need to get compensation. This response, ladies and gentlemen, is why I have little faith that they will take this report seriously and actually take on the fight. I have here 2 brochures, one from an elected council and one from an unelected council. I won't bore you with all the comments. I'll just read out the opening statements from each and let you determine which council is which. One council says, Council blah has no powers to stop WestConnex. The other council says, WestConnex will have a devastating effect on our inner city. It's all about the message, unelected administrator. You may not have any power, but you can actually proactively try and stop or slow down or create awareness of what an impact this monstrous project will have on the inner city. The council, if you haven't determined, the first one was by our unelected council. It then goes on to talk about every single aspect you ever wanted to know about WestConnex. I hope they pay for this propaganda. I really do.
John, that's 4 minutes.
I'm wrapping up.
Thank you.
The other council goes on to talk about how they are organising a better city planning seminar and listed the many influential speakers they have secured for the event. Did you get an invite? Probably not. Mr. Unelected Administrator, you do realise that we expect more from you than just running around and sweeping up the rubble from demolition sites.
And how was your holiday last week?
Well, if that's all you can offer, you only have 10 months left to do it.
No, I'm not trying to shit.
Ted Cassidy, former mayor, former councillor, Ashfield, former Ashfield Council. Everything seems to be former, including the people of my community who are suffering very badly from what is happening in Haberfield with the WestConnex project. I must say, Mr. Administrator, when I first saw the plan for this stack that on the corner of Wattle Street, it immediately looked to me like it was a monument to the fallen dead, something that you would see in a graveyard where lots of people have fought a battle and lost. And I was surprised that this particular structure seems to be going ahead without any objections from this council. Secondly, I would like to say I'm appalled at the treatment that the business people along Haberfield Road, Parramatta Road, that have been treated in relation to compensation. In today's Courier newspaper, you will see an article of Jack's Tyres. Now, Jack's Tyres is a group of an organisation that's been around the inner west probably for 50 years, even more. Not owned by the same people at the moment. Jack Adolphson was the original owner, but nevertheless they are suffering in the way of getting ample compensation for being ousted from their premises.
The council has instructed solicitors to challenge that compensation. An independent valuation is being carried out by valuers who are involved in the other compensation matter with the council. In relation to the stack, well, former councillor Cassie would know that the council strongly opposed the proposal, including the stack and other components of the project. So the council certainly hasn't been sitting idle in relation to the impacts of this proposal.
I will be further amending those draft revised terms of reference to make it clear that the committee will continue to have a very formal and structured role in relation to advising this council on key matters that are coming before the council. So that was a strong message I got from the local advisory committee, that they valued that role and saw it as important to representing their communities to council, and I agree.
Thank you, Mr Administrator, and notwithstanding the comments you've made about your intention to essentially rescind the proposal that yourself and the General Manager put forward last week, I'd like to speak against the draconian measures that you had originally proposed. These changes have not been made available to the public, so I also intend to table copies of the changes to the terms of reference at the media table over there for the public to be able to access them. They should have been included in the report tonight for former councillors and members of the public to be able to consider. Put simply, the changes to the Local Representation Advisory Committee proposed by the Administrator and the General Manager would turn that committee into a toothless tiger. They would remove the ability to scrutinise reports, amend proposed policies or make any official recommendations to Council on behalf of local residents. Not long after the amalgamation took place and several fiery public meetings had been undertaken, the Administrator pleaded with myself and the other deposed mayors, and I believe other deposed councillors, to participate in the committee system for the simple reason that this government would have been completely unworkable if there wasn't some evidence that there was genuine consultation and participation by elected representatives. Our clear precondition, as you will recall, Mr Administrator, was that those committees would be fair dinkum. And we were given the impression through your public statements and your guarantees to us that that would be the case. We told you that we wanted to ensure that long-awaited projects were continued and delivered on time, and that proper administration and transparent decision-making were upheld. And one fact that you don't seem to have understood in the time that you've been running this government is that scrutiny and accountability of officers' reports and of your decisions is a process of good government. It will help you to make better decisions if you actually have business papers produced and someone other than yourself overseeing them. Now it seems that having become comfortable in the seat of power, that those commitments that you gave us mean nothing, and that your intention, if you can get away with it, is to diminish our participation in those committees and make them insignificant. Not satisfied with being the only person in the Inner West who gets a vote on council decisions, Mr Pearson, it seems to me that you're determined to abolish the last democratic forum that was left for local residents to have their voices heard. And in fact, Mr General Manager, in your briefing of me about these proposed changes last week, you informed me that one of the reasons that you were proposing them was because you simply couldn't be bothered. It wasn't worth the staff time or your time to have to prepare business papers and deal with the two committees that there are left. And in fact, that you had a long commute from the Northern Beaches to come here and your time was valuable. Well, you're both being paid several $100,000 a year to run a government. I'd ask for an extension of time. You're both being paid several $100,000 a year to run a government. It's not compulsory, and if you don't want to run a committee system, resign.
I think your RAC members are fair dinkum about wanting to represent community views on key projects and issues. And we are fair dinkum in that we want to scrutinise and give input into key items that come up on the agenda. There are a number of items on the agenda tonight where you could have really benefited from having input from those people who have spent a lot of time, effort and energy representing their communities and coming to understand what people want.
I've been associated with this council for nearly 13, or for Ashfield Council for nearly 13 years, and over that time I've been part of many committees, and never have I seen a committee of any sort that didn't have minutes until the last couple of weeks. And this came about in a very underhand way. And this is just for the benefit of those here who may not be aware of what's been going on. On the 13th of September, this was the agenda. This is what is considered too large to have to produce. A business paper that came out for our meeting. On the minutes were produced from that meeting, and that is the last meeting where we've been able to make any sort of recommendation. Following on from that, on the 20th, and I might say that was the first meeting of the new General Manager, and that happened, I think, on day 2 of his time here at Inner West Council. We then went to the 20th of September, where this is what we got. This bit of paper with three things written on it, and subsequent to that, unbeknown to most of us, we didn't pick up on it at the time, it was suddenly called a briefing, no longer called a meeting. So I then, a couple of weeks later, when we were heading to the next meeting, I was looking for the minutes, and I discovered on the website that everything is now called a briefing. There were no minutes. When I rang and asked, I then got an email. I got an email from a staff member to say, the last joint LRAC meeting is a briefing session, so there's no business paper and meeting minutes. So suddenly we went from being a committee where we were able to give input, where we always knew that not our comments were not necessarily going to be acknowledged or accepted, but it was the ability and for the community to see that we were at least trying to represent their interests.
Before I reinforce and agree with the previous comments, I'd also like to note that in the minutes there was a presentation by the Greater Sydney Commission, and people should be aware that that is yet another very undemocratic thing that's going to be foisted upon residents, because planning powers will be further taken away from councils. Now, there is a tendency, Mr Administrator, in history for those who have been given power by non-democratic means without checks and balances to want to consolidate power.
I'm very dismayed that I don't have an elected council anymore. It makes me very suspicious that that the state government is busy trying to impose things on the people of New South Wales that are unpopular, and it seems to be very convenient to impose unelected administrators on local government areas to enable them to get away with it. And it seems, on top of that, to then go and take away the one bit of transparency that exists in the form of the deposed mayors and councillors having a committee to know about council business, makes me even more suspicious of what is the Inner West Council administrator wanting to hide.
It is particularly troubling that this was planned before the budget for next year has been handed down, and while one of the state government's disruptive mega projects is being rolled out, and while another 2 mega projects are in the pipeline. What has the administration got to hide? Why is it scared of the elected councillors? And was the state government involved in setting up this disgraceful grab for power? Ultimately, this move on the administration's part has destroyed what little confidence the residents have had left in it.
I've been involved in local government in several ways for at least 35 years. 2 terms as an alderman and deputy mayor on Leichhardt Council, although it was a fair while ago. I've stayed involved through all the residents' committees over the years. The first thing I'd like to mention is that even in registering for tonight, you had to put for or against, and I left that blank and made a comment in what it was about on the basis that how on earth how could I say for or against when there was nothing I could say for or against to. And it's just reinforcing what's been said about not having any information at all in the minutes about what was actually going on.
And I think to deny those councillors, the elected councillors, I don't call them SAC councillors, I regard them as my councillors still, and I think we all should. They are the last people to be elected by the people of this area to a local government responsibility. And as far as I'm concerned, I have far more respect for them than I have for an administrator or anyone appointed by the state government. Now, when there was a bit of a ruckus at the start of your term, you pleaded, as Darcy Byrne pointed out, for the councillors, the elected councillors from the various councillors, to come onto these committees to shield you from the hostility of local residents when you found out the local residents weren't too happy. Now, of course, I don't think that necessarily all the criticism of you was justified by some people, because you were appointed by the government. It should have been directed at the government. Nonetheless, the councillors, the elected councillors acted magnanimously to your request to help shield you. They went on to these committees, and now, a few months down the track, you've decided, oh no, thanks councillors, you've done your service for me, I'm now going to dispense with you and push you to one side. Now, I'm glad to hear that you are backing off from that, and I hope you are backing off. I hope you're backing off totally. But I think it might be useful for the residents and the elected councillors to know where this idea came from. Did it come from Macquarie Street? Did it come from someone within the council offices? Did it come from you? I think we're entitled to some sort of explanation.
I worked at Leichhardt Council about 20 years ago, and until the middle of this year, very many of the people that worked there were still there, working there very happily. It was a very harmonious workplace and people loved to be there. I understand from various people I've talked to that the situation is quite different now, that there's a very serious morale issue, that a number of people have moved on in situations out of there through events that are out of control. It raises the questions of how many constructive dismissals have been implemented, either purposefully or accidentally. What are the costs of the inappropriate appointments to directorships in terms of future redundancies? These things are raised by a cultural shift, which is represented by what happened at the last two LREC meetings I attended, both of which I had to leave early because I got so depressed.
I was reading your media release while I was waiting, and talking about this new structure, and there's a couple of items that caught my eye about how it will free up council staff to do their core duties, and also that irrespective of what happens, you're still welcomed and able to voice views of the local residents at the LRAC meetings and the council meetings. And I hope you have been listening to what is evident to all here, the unwelcoming nature of coming here every Tuesday once a month. Security guards, registration, show your ID. You talk for 3 minutes. You've implemented a little clock to tell us to speed up because we're taking up your valuable time. Has Rick gone home now? He's gone again. I'm sorry if we take up your time. I'm sorry if it is such an overwhelming process to manage 3 LGAs instead of 1, but that's what was put together. You should have known it was not going to work. There's just too many residents. And for you to then turn around and say, well, you know what, I want to get rid of the committees and I want to have more centralised power. How is that going to improve the situation when you don't have enough time now with the resources you have to do the job properly? I am totally against the removal of this committee. These are, as many have said, the last remnants of our elected council, and they should remain. But they should remain for one important reason, and that's what I'd like to see, is to ensure that you make valuable contribution and recommendations that are in the interests of the residents of the electorate. And if you choose to go against those recommendations, then let it be recorded. Let it be recorded so when you move on, we can look back at the decisions that were made in contradiction to the advice you were sought and made solely on your shoulders.
Move a resolution saying that you'll keep the committees.
I have already given that commitment, so there is no need for me. There was never an option of abolishing the committees. That was never on the agenda. It was a change. There was never that option on the table. It was a change of focus. I have heard the concerns that have been raised. I agree with the concerns that have been raised, and I'm going to reinstate that balanced approach.